The Ancestral Puebloans were an ancient Native American culture that spanned the present-day Four Corners region of the United States, comprising southeastern Utah, northeastern Arizona, northwestern New Mexico, and southwestern Colorado. It is believed that the Ancestral Puebloans developed, at least in part, from the Oshara tradition, who developed from the Picosa culture. They lived in a range of structures that included small family pit houses, larger structures to house clans, grand pueblos, and cliff-sided dwellings for defense. The Ancestral Puebloans possessed a complex network that stretched across the Colorado Plateau, linking hundreds of communities and population centers. They held a distinct knowledge of celestial sciences that found form in their architecture. The Kiva, a congregational space that was used chiefly for ceremonial purposes, was an integral part of this ancient people's community structure. In contemporary times, the people and their archaeological culture were referred to as Anasazi for historical purposes. The Navajo, who were not the descendants, called them by this term. Reflecting historic traditions, the term was used to mean ancient enemies. Contemporary Puebloans do not want this term used. Archaeologists continue to debate when this distinct culture emerged. The current consensus, based on terminology defined by the Picosa classification, suggests their emergence around the 12th century BC, during the archaeologically designated Early Basket Maker II era. Beginning with the earliest explorations and excavations, researchers identified Ancestral Puebloans as the forerunners of contemporary Pueblo peoples. 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites located in the United States are credited to the Pueblos: Mesa Verde National Park, Chaco Culture National Historical Park, and Taos Pueblo. Etymology: Pueblo, which means village in Spanish, was a term originating with the Spanish explorers who used it to refer to the people's particular style of dwelling. The Navajo people, who now reside in parts of former Pueblo territory, referred to the ancient people as Anasazi, an exonym meaning ancestors of our enemies, referring to the competition with the Pueblo peoples. The Navajo now use the term in the sense of referring to ancient people or ancient ones. Hopi people used the term Hisasanom, meaning ancient people, to describe the Ancestral Puebloans. Geography: the Ancestral Puebloans were one of 4 major prehistoric archaeological traditions recognized in the American Southwest. This area is sometimes referred to as Oase America in the region defining pre-Columbian southwestern North America. The others are the Mogollon, Hohokam, and Pottery. In relation to neighboring cultures, the Ancestral Puebloans occupied the northeast quadrant of the area. The Ancestral Puebloan homeland centers on the Colorado Plateau, but extends from central New Mexico on the east to southern Nevada on the west. Areas of southern Nevada, Utah, and Colorado form a loose northern boundary, while the southern edge is defined by the Colorado and Little Colorado rivers in Arizona and the Rio Puerco and Rio Grande in New Mexico. Structures and other evidence of Ancestral Puebloan culture has been found extending east onto the American Great Plains, in areas near the Cimarron and Pecos rivers and in the Galisteo Basin. Terrain and resources within this large region vary greatly. The Plateau regions have high elevations ranging from 4,500 to 8,500 feet. Extensive horizontal mesas are capped by sedimentary formations and support woodlands of junipers, pinon, and ponderosa pines, each favoring different elevations. Wind and water erosion have created steep-walled canyons and sculpted windows and bridges out of the sandstone landscape. In areas where resistant strata such as sandstone or limestone, overly more easily eroded strata such as shale rock overhangs formed. The ancestral Puebloans favored building under such overhangs for shelters and defensive building sites. All areas of the ancestral Puebloan homeland suffered from periods of drought and wind and water erosion. Summer rains could be unreliable and often arrived as destructive thunderstorms. While the amount of winter snowfall varied greatly, the ancestral Puebloans depended on the snow for most of the water. Snowmelt allowed the germination of seeds, both wild and cultivated, in the spring. Where sandstone layers overlay shale, snowmelt could accumulate and create seeps and springs, which the ancestral Puebloans used as water sources. Snow also fed the smaller, more predictable tributaries, such as the Chinle, Inemus, Jemez and Taos rivers. The larger rivers were less directly important to the ancient culture, as smaller streams were more easily diverted or controlled for irrigation. Cultural characteristics. The ancestral Puebloan culture is perhaps best known for the stone and earth dwellings its people built along cliff walls, particularly during the Pueblo II and Pueblo III eras, from about 900 to 1350 AD in total. The best preserved examples of the stone dwellings are now protected within United States' national parks, such as Navajo National Monument, Chaco Culture National Historical Park, Mesa Verde National Park, Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, Aztec Ruins National Monument, Bandelier National Monument, Hovenweep National Monument, and Canyon de Chelly National Monument. These villages, called pueblos by Spanish colonists, were only accessible by rope or through rock climbing. These astonishing building achievements had modest beginnings. The first ancestral Puebloan homes and villages were based on the pit house, a common feature in the basket-making periods. Ancestral Puebloans are also known for their pottery. In general, pottery used for cooking or storage in the region was unpainted gray, either smooth or textured. Pottery used for more formal purposes was often more richly adorned. In the northern or Anasazi portion of the ancestral Pueblo world, from about 500 to 1300 AD, the most common decorated pottery had black painted designs on white or light gray backgrounds. Decoration is characterized by fine hatching, and contrasting colors are produced by the use of mineral-based paint on a chalky background. South of the Anasazi Territory, in Mogollon settlements, pottery was more often hand-coiled, scraped, and polished, with red or brown coloring. Some tall cylinders are considered ceremonial vessels, while narrow-necked jars may have been used for liquids. Where in the southern portion of the region, particularly after 1150 AD, is characterized by heavier black line decoration and the use of carbon-based colorants. In northern New Mexico, the local black-on-white tradition, the Rio Grande white wares, continued well after 1300 AD. Changes in pottery composition, structure and decoration are signals of social change in the archaeological record. This is particularly true as the peoples of the American Southwest began to leave the traditional homes and migrate south. According to archaeologists Patricia Crown and Stedman Upham, the appearance of the bright colors on Salada polychromes in the 14th century may reflect religious or political alliances on a regional level. Late 14th and 15th century pottery from central Arizona, widely traded in the region, has colors and designs which may derive from earlier wear by both ancestral Pueblo and Mogollon peoples. The ancestral Puebloans also created many petroglyphs and pictographs. Architecture, Pueblo complexes and great houses. The ancestral Pueblo people crafted a unique architecture with planned community spaces. The ancient population centers such as Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, and Bantalea National Monument have brought renown to the ancestral Pueblo peoples. They consisted of apartment-like complexes and structures made from stone, adobe, mud, and other local material. All were carved into the sides of canyon walls. Developed within these cultures, the people also adopted design details from other cultures as far away as contemporary Mexico. In the day, these ancient towns and cities were usually multi-storied and multi-purposed buildings surrounding open plazas and view sheds. They were occupied by hundreds to thousands of ancestral Pueblo peoples. These population complexes hosted cultural and civic events and infrastructure that supported a vast outlying region hundreds of miles away, linked by transportation roadways, constructed well before 1492 AD. These ancestral Pueblo towns and villages in the southwestern United States were located in various defensive positions, for example, on high steep mesas such as at Mesa Verde, present-day Acoma Pueblo, called the Sky City, in New Mexico. Earlier than 900 AD and progressing past the 13th century, the population complexes were a major center of culture for the ancestral Puebloans. In Chaco Canyon, Chatoan developers quarried sandstone blocks and hauled timber from great distances, assembling 15 major complexes. These ranked as the largest buildings in North America until the late 19th century. Evidence of archaeoastronomy at Chaco has been proposed, with the sun dagger petroglyph at Fajada Butte a popular example. Many Chatoan buildings may have been aligned to capture the solar and lunar cycles, requiring generations of astronomical observations and centuries of skillfully coordinated construction. Climate change is thought to have led to the emigration of Chatoans and the eventual abandonment of the canyon, beginning with a 50-year drought that started in 1130. Great houses, immense complexes known as great houses, embodied worship at Chaco. Archaeologists have found musical instruments, jewelry, ceramics, and ceremonial items, indicating people in great houses were elite, wealthier families. They hosted indoor burials, where gifts were interred with the dead, often including bowls of food and turquoise beads. As architectural forms evolved and centuries passed, the houses kept several core traits. Most apparent is the sheer bulk. Complexes averaged more than 200 rooms each, and some enclosed up to 700 rooms. Individual rooms were substantial in size, with higher ceilings than ancestral Pueblo works of preceding periods. They were well planned. Vast sections or wings erected were finished in a single stage, rather than in increments. Houses generally faced the south. Plaza areas were almost always girt with edifices of sealed-off rooms or high walls. Houses often stood 4 or 5 stories tall, with single-story rooms facing the plaza. Room blocks were terraced to allow the tallest sections to compose the pueblo's rear edifice. Rooms were often organized into suites, with front rooms larger than rear interior, and storage rooms or areas. Ceremonial structures known as Kivas were built in proportion to the number of rooms in a pueblo. One small Kiva was built for roughly every 29 rooms. 9 complexes each hosted an oversized Great Kiva, each up to 63 feet in diameter. T-shaped doorways and stone lintels marked all Chatoan Kivas. Though simple and compound walls were often used, great houses were primarily constructed of core and veneer walls. 2 parallel load-bearing walls comprising dressed, flat sandstone blocks bound in clay mortar were erected. Gaps gaps between walls were packed with rubble, forming the wall's core. Walls were then covered in a veneer of small sandstone pieces, which were pressed into a layer of binding mud. These surfacing stones were often placed in distinctive patterns. The Chassewan structures altogether required the wood of 200,000 coniferous trees, mostly hauled on foot from mountain ranges up to 70 miles away. Ceremonial infrastructure. Great North Road, the 30-foot wide highway. One of the most notable aspects of ancestral Puebloan infrastructure is at Chaco Canyon, known as the Chaco Road, a system of roads radiating out from many great house sites such as Pueblo Bonito, Chetro-It, and Una Vida. They led towards small outlier sites and natural features within and beyond the canyon limits. Through satellite images and ground investigations, archaeologists have detected at least 8 main roads that together run for more than 180 miles, and are more than 30 feet wide. These were excavated into a smooth level surface in the bedrock created through the removal of vegetation and soil. The ancestral Pueblo residents of Chaco Canyon cut large ramps and stairways into the cliff rock to connect the roadways on the ridge tops of the canyon to the sites on the valley bottoms. The largest roads, constructed at the same time as many of the great house sites, are the Great North Road, the South Road, the Coyote Canyon Road, the Shaker Face Road, Arshaslepa Road, Mexican Springs Road, the West Road, and the shorter Pintado Chaco Road. Simple structures like berms and walls are found sometimes aligned along the courses of the roads. Also, some tracts of the roads lead to natural features such as springs, lakes, mountaintops, and pinnacles. The Great North Road, the longest and most well-known of these roads, is the Great North Road. The Great North Road originates from different routes close to Pueblo Bonito and Chetro-It. These roads converge at Pueblo Alto and from the lead north beyond the canyon limits. There are no communities along the road's course, apart from small, isolated structures. Archaeological interpretations of the Chaco road system are divided between an economic purpose and a symbolic, ideological role linked to ancestral Puebloan beliefs. The system was first discovered at the end of the 19th century. It was not excavated and studied until the 1970s. By the late 20th century, archaeologists' assessments were helped by satellite images and photographs taken from plane flights over the area. Archaeologists suggested that the road's main purpose was to transport local and exotic goods to and from the canyon. Someone also suggested that these large roads were used to quickly move an army from the canyon to the outlier communities, a purpose similar to the road systems known for the Roman Empire. This last scenario has long been discarded because of the lack of any evidence of a permanent army. The economic purpose of the Chaco road system is shown by the presence of luxury items at Pueblo Bonito and elsewhere in the canyon. Items such as Picosa, turquoise, marine shells, which are not part of this environment, in addition to imported vessels distinguished by design, prove that the Chaco had long-distance commercial relations with other distant regions. The widespread use of timber in Chassewan constructions was based on a large and easy transportation system. This resource is not locally available. Through analysis of various strontium isotopes, archaeologists have realized that much of the timber that composes Chassewan construction came from a number of distant mountain ranges, a finding that also supported the economic significance of the Chaco Road. Ancient religion and road building. Other archaeologists think instead that the main purpose of the road system was a religious one, providing pathways for periodic pilgrimages and facilitating regional gatherings. gatherings for seasonal ceremonies. As furthermore, considering that some of these roads seem to go nowhere, experts suggest that they can be linked, especially the Great North Road, to astronomical observations, solstice marking, and agricultural cycles. This religious explanation is supported by modern Pueblo beliefs about a north road leading to the place of origin and along which the spirits of the dead travel. According to modern Pueblo people, this road represents the connection to the Saipapu, the place of emergence of the ancestors, or a dimensional doorway. During their journey from the Saipapu to the world of the living, the spirits stop along the road and eat the food left for them by the living. Astronomy played an important role in Chaco culture. Many ceremonial structures were deliberately built along a north-south axis alignment. The main buildings at Pueblo Bonito, for example, are arranged according to this direction. They likely served as central places for ceremonial journeys across the landscape. Sparse concentrations of ceramic fragments along the North Road have been related to some sort of ritual activities carried out along its expanse. Isolated structures located on the roadsides, as well as on top of the canyon cliffs and ridge crests, have been interpreted as shrines related to these activities. Long linear grooves were cut into the bedrock along certain roads but do not seem to point in any specific direction. It has been proposed that these were part of pilgrimage paths followed during ritual ceremonies. Archaeologists agree that the purpose of this road system may have changed through time, and that the Chaco road system probably functioned for both economic and ideological reasons. Cliff Palace communities and design. Throughout the southwest Ancestral Puebloan region, and at Mesa Verde, the best-known site for the large number of well-preserved cliff dwellings, housing, defensive and storage complexes were built in shallow caves and under rock overhangs along canyon walls. The structures contained within these alcoves were mostly blocks of hard sandstone, held together and plastered with adobe mortar. Specific constructions had many similarities, but were generally unique in form due to the individual topography of different alcoves along the canyon walls. In marked contrast to earlier constructions and villages on top of the mesas, the cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde reflected a region-wide trend during the 13th century toward the aggregation of growing regional populations into close, highly defensible quarters. Common Pueblo architectural forms, including Kivas, towers, and pit houses are included in this area, but the space constrictions of these alcoves resulted in a far denser concentration of the populations. Mughouse, a typical cliff dwelling of the period, was home to around 100 people who shared 94 small rooms and 8 kivas, built right up against each other and sharing many of the walls. Builders in these areas maximized space in any way they could, and no areas were considered off-limits to construction. Not all of the people in the region lived in cliff dwellings. Many colonized the canyon rims and slopes in multi-family structures that grew to unprecedented size as populations swelled. Decorative motifs for these sandstone mortar constructions, both cliff dwellings and non-included T-shaped windows and doors. This has been taken by some archaeologists, such as Stephen Lexon, as evidence of the continuing reach of the Chaco Canyon elite system, which had seemingly collapsed around a century before. Other researchers see these motifs as part of a more generalized Puebloan style and/or spiritual significance, rather than evidence of a continuing specific elite socio-economic system.